Okay, welcome back to Ben and Matt's Marvellous Journey. We are taking a deep dive into the entire history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 week at a time, just like every website in the world is now doing. But we had this idea first, damn it, and I don't care how many internal design docs they can show to prove that they had it already. I'm Matt Waters, I host this. I'm joined by Ben Phillips, he is the Ben in Ben and Matt. Ben, how are you, other than, swimming with the cold virus?
I'm not swimming yet. I'm kind of paddling in the early. I need to be ready for Monday because I'm seeing Hamilton on Monday. So if I'm not better by Monday, I'm going to be very sad.
Let's see if you spot the 3 very minor lyric changes there are in the British version of Hamilton.
I've been told this.
Oh, okay.
Did you spot them?
I noticed one at the time and forgot immediately after it ended, and then when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. But this is not a Hamilton review podcast. This is,
Good, because I've not seen it yet.
Well, exactly, but, maybe next time. So, it's episode 5, which means we're going to be talking about Captain America, the First Avenger. Before we do that, do go to entertherealworld.com. That's 2 E's real. It's a pun that doesn't work out loud, but it works visually. And check out all the content we got there. I recently launched a new podcast called From Broadcast Depth, which is all about Lost, hosted by Kevin Ford and Ben Lundy. By the time you hear this, they should be on episode 3, if you don't count their pilot as episode 1. Which means they should be talking about episodes 5 and 6 of Lost, season 1. It's a good time, you should go listen to it. But we are not talking about Lost, because Ben would talk for 6 straight hours and lose his voice. We're talking about Captain America, the First Avenger, where Ben will only talk for 2 hours and lose his voice. We're going to try and change the format up a little bit here. I thought there were some elements that weren't working. We would like this to be an interactive podcast. Unfortunately, we're on a several-week delay between recording and posting, so it doesn't work that well. But in theory, I think this will work better. So, to get things started, I just want to keep it very light and breezy and just sort of one-sentence reviews, sort of very broad thoughts before we get into the minutiae, the nitty-gritty. I feel this one is kind of... no one really talks about it that much. I don't know how much they did at the time, but I feel... yeah, definitely when people were talking about these early films, no one really seemed to give much of a shit about Captain America. I remember someone being like, it's actually really good, and I bought it on his recommendation. I was like, yeah, you know what? I like that. I think it's aged the best of pre-Avengers films. I think it's more enjoyable retrospectively because of how, over time, Marvel have built Steve Rogers up to be... a character you care about, so you come back to these and you're like, you know what, maybe I loved him all along. And I always like the setting, putting it in the middle of World War II like that, with this sort of alternate history thing. Yeah, so I've always had a big soft spot for this, and whenever people would sort of shit on it, I'd be like, hey, but all of this stuff. Ben, what are your sort of just very general thoughts on this film?
I saw this film in cinemas when it came out, obviously, because I saw all of these films in cinemas when they came out. It's not that big a boast, because they're all very, very popular movies in their own right. But basically, I remember seeing this with a very similar group to who I saw Thor with only 2 or 3 months beforehand. And I think I was the only person that came out of it at that point and was like, I thought that was a better movie than Thor.
Yeah.
And I have continued to have the opinion that this is a better movie than Thor, and I have now even gone... my opinion has grown to be the fact that this is the second best movie in Marvel's Phase 1.
See, when we've been talking about Phase 1, I've not been including the Avengers. I've been going this is the best third act in Phase 1. I'm forgetting that Avengers is totally part of that. So
it is the climax of Phase 1, yeah.
Yes. Of the pre-Avengers films, I think this is the best one.
Yes, 100%.
And I don't think it's that close, to be honest. Right, so the boring, I think this stuff is interesting personally. Released July 22nd, 2011, so that's 2 months after Thor. Films that had come out not made by Marvel between Thor and this. Ryan Reynolds' The Green Lantern, which, demolished any hope of Green Lantern having any momentum. And X-Men First Class, so, an attempt at establishing a new property and a kind of a reboot after X-Men had been floundering. So... and First Class was well received. So, superhero movies, we're getting there, Budget of $140 million, exactly the same as Iron Man 1. I guess because there's more human characters and less sort of CG than in Hulk and Thor. Although, a lot of CG in this, actually. So, Maybe they're just economical with it. It made $371 million against that 140 budget. So more than the $263 million of Hulk, but a lot lower than all the others, including Thor.
It's about $80 million less than Thor, isn't it?
Yeah. And my figuring is that Captain America as a character, before Marvel did what they did with him on screen, it's a character that when you heard it said out loud, if you knew who he was or not, you just instinctively sort of recoiled, or a lot of people did. He wasn't considered a cool character. And I also wonder if a kind of, a character called Captain America, as international film markets have meant more and more over time, and have sort of been the secret to Marvel's success, starting, I think, with the Avengers. I just wonder if maybe there was kind of an anti-US sentiment for this first one before anyone knew what it was. I wonder if these things played into why it didn't make as much money, because you'd think it would be a rolling thing where people are like, oh, Marvel's cool, and it just each one makes more. But for whatever reason, more than Hulk, but less than all the others.
I definitely remember there being apprehension for this one. Like, the people who I went with, like, you hear the title Captain America, you're like, oh, it's going to be this jingoistic, rah, America's the best in the world. Especially when you find out the movie set during World War II, and especially in countries that...
A time period that America love to sort of rewrite history about. So. Yeah,
so they're like, oh, we won the war for those countries and stuff like that. And when the international market is basically Europe, Japan, having America come in and say, we won World War II is a bitter pill to swallow for... countries that actually had to deal with the fallout on a far more, I'm not going to say personal level, but like there are places in Europe that will never recover from stuff that happened during World War II, whereas America, like Pearl Harbor is awful, but...
That's another podcast. So it's directed by Joe Johnston, who is a legendary former ILM contributor. His background is in art and special effects on the original Star Wars trilogy, Indiana Jones, which is Red Skull says a line about the Fuhrer digs for trinkets in the desert, which is a direct nod to Indiana Jones. That's kind of cool. He also directed Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Jumanji, October Sky, and The Rocketeer. So,
one of those is very, very important for this one.
Yes. Written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who had done the Chronicles of Narnia sort of new series. They have since become the go-to Marvel writers, as they would do script work or outright write Thor 2, Captain America 2, Captain America 3, Avengers 3, Avengers 4 they're writing, and they did some polish on Guardians of the Galaxy, so they found their dudes to kind of do the overall story for Marvel.
Most of those scripts are very good.
Yes, they are. One might say they're the best. We'll figure that out. Joss Whedon got to do a little bit of tweaking on the film, but I always think things like that are massively overblown. Like, how much did he do? How much did he just give them feedback and then they did it? I don't know.
And it's one of those things where it's like he probably came in to give artistic cohesion. Like, this is going to be my version of Captain America. I'm going to tweak these lines. They fit more and flow more like something my version of the character would say.
Yes. Part of that contract he had with Avengers, he got to do a little bit of dictation about the characters. And it's 124 minutes long, which is about the length of an Iron Man film. The Iron Man films and Captain America are both longer than Hulk and Thor. Is it a corollary that these more human stories have to be longer? I don't know. Anyway, so I'm going to do a little bit of background about them getting this film together, and then Ben has the Herculean task of summing up like Captain America in the comics in less than 2 minutes. Maybe,
I can try. I will try.
Maybe 3. Very broad. Okay, so there are, of course, many films called Captain America that have come out, and if you've walked into a shop that sells DVDs and looked for these Marvel ones, you will probably have been almost taken in by the packaging that has been redone to look somewhat similar. Lots of non-theatrically released Captain America films going back decades and decades, because this character was created in 1940.
1941 is when his first appearance was cover dated, which might be 1940, but it'd be very late 1940 if it was.
Okay, well, either way. Very odd character. So Marvel had been trying to, as we cover this in episode 1, go back and listen, but their sort of early attempts to just license off everything they could to make films. They'd been working on a Captain America film from 1997, until 2003. Joe Simon, who Ben presumably will mention. There were ugly lawsuits which completely destroyed production on this film, and they just abandoned it outright in 2003. 2005, obviously, they get the huge loan from Merrill Lynch, and they are still working with Paramount. This is their last film to be distributed by Paramount. Kevin Feige wants it as part of his slate. He said about half of it would take place in World War II. That turned out to not be true. And Avi Arad, who was still there at the time, wanted it to come out in 2008. They were big into this one. Jon Favreau asked about doing it as a buddy comedy, but they were like, maybe do Iron Man instead, and he jumped at that. Louis Leterrier, he wanted to do this after he had done Incredible Hulk, and they said, now we're good. I guess an indictment on the quality of Incredible Hulk. The 2007-2008 writers' strike delayed development on this, so, chance of it coming out in 2008, gone. Marvel actually pulled some strings, though, and got it back into production. They hired Joe Johnston in late 2008. He brought in Marcus and McFeely to do some rewrites. I had written down who'd written it before, but it's gone. And then Marvel wanted Chris Evans as Captain America from the word go. But he turned the role down 3 different times because he was scared of what the fame would do to him. But Robert Downey Jr. was like, bro, I make so much money and I can make any film I want now. You should take this. And before I let you do your spiel about Captain America, I'm going to reel off the list of people that auditioned or are rumoured to have auditioned for Captain America, and I want you to pick your favourite one. So we have, in no particular order.
Oh, God.
Sam Worthington, Will Smith, Garrett Hedlund, Channing Tatum, Scott Porter, Mike Vogel, Sebastian Stan, who's in this film, Wilson Bethel, John Krasinski, Chad Michael Murray, Michael Cassidy, Chase Crawford, Derek Teller, Jensen Ackles, Kellen Lutz, Ryan Phillippe, I have never had a definitive pronunciation of that name, Alexander Skarsgård, Kevin and Joe Jonas, and Dane Cook. Who is your favourite? Ironic or not, or just purely you love that audition? Who's your favourite out of that group? I'm a huge fan of the Jonas Brothers attempting to audition for Captain America.
I think John Krasinski of those
is the one interesting.
Is the most interesting of those, because I feel like he kind of fits with that, like Chris Pratt coming from an NBC comedy.
Yeah.
And you look at what he's done to do the Jack Ryan series he's doing at the moment.
Yeah, and he was he in that Benghazi film?
Yes.
13 Hours?
Yeah.
And you also consider that Emily Blunt was originally Black Widow, and she had to drop out to make Gulliver's Travels. That might have been fun, because they're married.
Yes. No, I think he's the most interesting. There are a couple of names on there which are just like, really? Like, Chad Michael Murray, obviously.
Yeah, he would get to be in the... Was he just in the Agent Carter one-shot, or is he in Agent Carter?
He's in both seasons of Agent Carter.
Oh, cool. Good. As a recovering One Tree Hill fan, I will wish good things for him. His bad, but maybe good, actually acting.
He was good fun in Agent Carter. He was.
In the one episode I saw. So, right, Ben, Captain America. For the uninitiated, give us the history of this character. I've been thinking, should we say what these characters can do with their powers? But I guess that's pretty much unnecessary. But anyway,
we hope you've seen these movies.
Well, yeah, kind of. So go for it, Ben. Talk about.
Yeah. Captain America was invented in cover dated March 1941 for Timely Comics, not Marvel Comics. They would eventually become Marvel Comics by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby is obviously the ubiquitous creator. He is co-created every single character that we have focused on so far. The first character not created by Stan Lee in this, mostly because Stan Lee wasn't actually writing comics in 1940. Captain America kind of became the figurehead of a lot of American tension, or a lot of American kind of war efforts, and not war efforts, but he very much became linked with the war, especially when one of the issues features Captain America punching Hitler in the face.
A moment we will see recreated in this film.
Which is absolutely wonderful. Obviously, along Superman, you can see a lot of Jewish comic book writers in the 1940s and 1930s kind of doing really good patriotic and kind of work to kind of undermine the Nazi regime, what with Superman and what with Captain America. Captain America, obviously, the kind of more overtly political of the two of them, but with Hydra, they kind of become Marvel's easy get-out clause to kind of do a lot of stories involving Nazism and kind of commentary on that kind of thing. And there's lots of interesting articles at the moment about whether or not Marvel have treated the legacy of these kind of two Jewish creators doing World War II stories and then making Captain America a Nazi fairly recently in the comic books, but that's a whole other issue. So basically, Captain America gets frozen at the end of World War II, discontinued is what really happens, and then Stan Lee decides to bring him back in Avengers #4. So in the comic book timeline, he's only gone for about 10 years.
Yes.
But obviously he is a man displaced out of time. People have moved on and all the rest of it. But in Marvel Comics, he kind of stayed as part of the Avengers for the vast majority of its run. He had his own comic book, but nothing. There's interesting things there, but nothing really interesting until Ed Brubaker came along and started his now legendary Winter Soldier run, which will be more important for the second movie. But that's kind of where Captain America stood at this point.
Yeah.
In comic history, when this movie came out, was Ed Brubaker was doing some very, very interesting things with the character.
Making it a little bit more, like, thrillery, like, yeah. I do find it incredibly interesting that, like, this very popular character in, like, one era was just completely just dropped and then brought back. And it's, we take it for granted, oh, he got frozen and then he woke up, as if that's the beginning of the story. It's like, no, there was, like a huge number of stories before the whole ice thing came in.
I mean, he even had, like, there were movie serials
exactly,
with him
yeah.
in the 1940s. Like, they had done, I think he was one of the first comic book characters to be, or superhero comic book characters to be put into film. And these were done in 1944, so, like, in the peak of the war. So, like, elements of this movie are
imitating life.
Imitating life, yeah. Like, he was very much a jingoistic character used to kind of boost up rah rah rah, isn't America great feelings.
And it's something that Joe Johnston said he wanted to avoid. Like, he didn't want to do a jingoist movie, and, well, we'll find out. So I said I wanted to change up the format of this. I normally at this point read a synopsis of the movie, just like reading off something I wrote at work while bored, like 3 minutes, and it's boring because you've seen this film. So instead, we are going to kind of move through the film chronologically and talk about the stuff as it comes. So the opening scene of the film is set in the Arctic. These people have found something. It's all very mysterious. There's a big ship, and then in the ice you see the iconic shield. Nothing really to write home about here. It sets up a little bit of mystery. If you know anything about Captain America, you obviously are like, oh, here we go. I swear one of these, like, random dudes is a dead ringer for Clark Gregg as Agent Coulson, but
I thought that as well.
Yeah.
I think it's the one who was already there is the thing, which I think makes it.
And, like, if he's in it, he's not credited anywhere, and he's not on a did you know or anything. Because there's that line in Avengers where it's like, I watched you sleep and stuff. And it's like, are you sure that's not? I wrote down Coulson, and I looked it up and was like, nope, not Coulson. Anyway, we then flash back to 1942, and Johann Schmidt of Hydra, which is a Nazi sort of secret weapons research wing, he finds the Tesseract in this church in Norway, and then murders everyone in the town anyway, even though he said he wouldn't. So we get a little cameo from Walder Frey of Game of Thrones here, I believe.
Yes, David Bradley, Natural Treasure.
Indeed. But more importantly, we are introduced up front to our villain. See how this is changing already? Villains are normally at the end. So Hugo Weaving is playing Johann Schmidt, John Smith, that is, and he was Agent Smith. Very good. AKA the Red Skull. He is doing a Werner Herzog impression, and I kind of am into it. He hated making this film. He hated doing the makeup. He has little care for the existence of this role. So even though, as we'll say at the end, he categorically is clearly supposed to have returned, like the way they do his death, he ain't ever coming back, or at least he isn't doing it. They kind of blow their load with a very high-profile villain up front. Like, I would say, obviously Loki has now become something else, but if you look at, like, comic book canon and, like, importance in stories, Red Skull is surely the highest profile villain in Phase 1 of Marvel.
Yeah, but it's also that thing where I think he's also of the characters they've done, I think he's the only kind of, apart from Loki, the only iconic one that kind of, like, transcends the medium in some ways. Yeah. Like, Red Skull is not kind of your Joker level, he's not your Lex Luthor level, he's not your Green Goblin level of kind of like, this character is known to a wider audience. No. But he is about as close as Marvel characters who aren't Spider-Man get to having that kind of audience ubiquity with their villain.
I mean, you get it instantly. He's a Nazi with a red, like, skull face.
Not immediately. This movie really does kind of drag out the reveal for what he looks like.
It is an odd decision, I think. I guess maybe because he hated it, that they tried to minimise it for him or something. I wonder if it was originally written that he's masked for so much of it. He is wearing a Hugo Weaving mask for the first sort of 40 minutes before we reveal that he actually looks like underneath. This little scene at the beginning, I just wanted to make note that, you know, they're making links. You know, they're not only introducing Hugo Weaving and Toby Jones, as Arnim Zola pops up not long after this, but they're kind of doing a lot of universe building here.
I think this movie does it a lot better than other movies have done it so far.
Yeah, Thor made its attempts, and you've had your cute like winks and nods here and there, but this is the Tesseract, which will take... We saw it in the post-credits of Thor. It's going to obviously be the MacGuffin in the Avengers. We get links to Asgard with Red Skull talking about Odin, and like we've just seen Odin in his treasure room, and you know all these pictures that are carved, and it's like very clearly supposed to be the Asgardians, because as we established, the Asgardians are the Norse gods or inspired them. So I do like all of that stuff. And they give you these cute little nods with, like, David Bradley says, like, you know, you will burn. And he says, I already have, foreshadowing that this is a mask he's wearing. After he shoots him, a drop of blood falls on his little Hydra pendant, but just on the skull. Red Skull. Come on, everyone. You know, we see him kill people despite saying he wouldn't. It's standard Nazi stuff. I don't really want to talk about these as they come, because it keeps happening, but we kind of see from here these sporadic scenes cutting to Schmidt and, as I said, Toby Jones as Arnim Zola, just fucking around with the Tesseract, creating these mad scientist weapons. Schmidt gets painted at one point, and in the shadows he is, if you pay attention, out of his mask. It's fine. We'll talk about like the overall quality and the canon of these villains at the end, but yeah, I think this opening scene, it does good stuff to establish that universe, and you get a sense of who Schmidt is. But
do you know what the scenes with Schmidt and Arnim Zola remind me of the most?
What?
They remind me of the scenes with the Weasels and the Panther King in Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yes, my lord. Yeah.
Just the random kind of like they cut away every so often. You get this kind of like
duct tape. It's fucking duct tape. Anyway, that joke plays to 6 people. So let's get into something actually more interesting. We then meet a skinny as hell Steve Rogers, who is 5'0" from Brooklyn.
And has no chin.
He has no chin. We will talk about this. He repeatedly attempts to enlist in the army for World War II, and of course he fails because he is a tiny little asthmatic with various health problems that if you freeze you can see them all. They're fun. You know, we see his little life. His, you know, he goes to a movie, someone's being rude, he tells them not to be, he gets beaten up. But this, you know, to touch on this, as you said, so they're using these effects to make Chris Evans look like a tiny skinny little Weasley boy. I had just assumed every bit of it was body doubling. In fact, most of this is a effects company digitally shrinking Chris Evans, which is kind of crazy. As you said, he's got no chin, like his face seems to just end prematurely.
It's only when he like talks a lot. Like when his face is stationary, he looks fine.
When he's when he's in photos, it's crazy. And I remember at the time thinking, "Whoa, this is great!" And I look at it now, I'm like, "Oh no!"
It's mostly like it's almost like they just needed to make his mouth about like 5% smaller, because when he opens his mouth, you can see that like the face that they've got can't include all of Chris Evans' actual chin, and so it just keeps kind of disappearing.
Yes.
Like you almost it's. The effect is basically like a Snapchat filter, where basically like when you go out of the frame, it just kind of looks a bit odd, but done on a movie level. So it's good. I think it works better when they do forced perspective stuff, like when they've got people stood really close to the camera who look really tall, and then Chris Evans is just very, very far away with some like massive bins next to him, like looking up. Like that works really well because it's a cinematic trick. I mean, like, if Peter Jackson did it in the Lord of the Rings movies, it's probably going to work well for your movie. So, I mean, that practical effect works, but it's obvious like they can't have Chris Evans looking like he's just had every inch of muscle drained out of his body.
Yeah.
So it works, but obviously gets shakier the kind of further away we get from the movie.
Yeah. So you mentioned massive bins. He, of course, cutely picks up a trash can lid to use as a shield, foreshadowing that whole thing. It's a scene we'll see repeated with a taxi door and stuff. Chris Evans, of course, is playing Steve Rogers' Captain America, a role he was only paid $300,000 for, which, when you consider some of the salaries that movie stars command, when you consider that Robert Downey Jr. gets a flat $50 million plus box office take for these, that is a criminal amount of money to pay Chris Evans.
We'll also say only $300,000.
I mean, obviously, if someone wants to give me $300,000, I will take it, but that's crazy when you look at this. No wonder that they got so much in this film for that budget. Yeah, I do enjoy this early stuff because you get to see who he is, and I think a genuine thing with this is Captain America was not born this perfect Uberman. He is the same character who just happens to be given physical gifts that allow him to act out like what he is in his head. And I love this desperate desire to help other people by trying to enlist repeatedly and wanting to do his part and wanting to be the nice guy that tells someone, hey, stop it, and like standing up for people.
I think it helps that this is the movie where we get I hesitate to say like most time pre-transformation, because obviously like him joining the army and being trained is not his normal day-to-day life. No, yeah. But we do get to see a lot more of Steve Rogers as Steve Rogers, because obviously in Thor it's pretty quick that he has the one fight and then he's down on Earth. In Iron Man, he's in the cave quite quickly. In Hulk, he's already the Hulk. Yeah. This is the first one where it feels like they actually give a good third of the movie to just seeing him doing his thing.
And it's something that when there is a bad superhero movie, a frequent thing with it is they spend too long getting to the powers, and I kind of wish that a lot more of them started straight away. But this one, I think it really works because you have to bank all this stuff with who he is as a person.
Yeah, like this is probably the most important of who this person is before and after the transformation. Yeah. Like, Iron Man is not a fundamentally different person when he gets in the suit. He is still him.
Yeah, something that we, in fact, criticised that film for doing.
Yeah, whereas Steve Rogers is, like, the whole point of it is the lessons he learned pre-Captain America are what makes him a good Captain America.
Indeed. He says the line about, I could do this all day, and I think there's something else that they both end up coming back, and I like that. Just to really hammer home, this is the same guy. He just happens to work out now. He is saved from this fight by his best friend Bucky Barnes, who is about to ship out. Before he does, he takes Steve on a couple of dates, including future Doctor Who companion Jenna Coleman. They go to a World's Fair style exhibition-y thing where a young Howard Stark is presenting a car that kind of flies for like a few seconds and then doesn't. I mentioned Bucky. Sebastian Stan, who auditioned for Captain America, is playing James Buchanan Barnes as Steve Rogers' best friend. He is extremely handsome. I will say it now. I will say it repeatedly. I don't think he really sets the world alight, but he is very solid just as Steve's best friend.
I came to this with a liking of Sebastian Stan, because he'd done some TV work that I kind of enjoyed. He was very good in Kings, which was a kind of weird take on the story of King David, which he was very good in. I also enjoyed him in Gossip Girl, because I used to watch Gossip Girl. If we're admitting to watching old mid-2000s teen shows.
I got you with the One Tree Hill. You come back with the Gossip Girl. That's
okay.
Fair. That's fair.
So having him in this, it's interesting. His Bucky Barnes is interesting because obviously Bucky Barnes in the comic is supposed to be
younger than him,
the kind of Robin to Captain America's Batman, despite Bucky coming before Robin was invented, I believe.
Indeed.
I might be wrong there.
I believe that's true. I believe Robin is a kind of riff on Bucky. Popularity of the boy sidekick to the grown-ass man that shouldn't be dragging a boy into a combat zone. That's the 40s. So yeah, as I mentioned, Howard Stark. Dominic Cooper playing a young Howard Stark. Way charismatic. John Slattery as older Howard Stark, right?
Yes, John Slattery from Mad Men.
Yes. I mean, not knocking him, but this Howard Stark is a lot more fun. I can't quite imagine him turning into John Slattery, but hey. But yeah, he's a lot of fun.
Dominic Cooper is my Howard Stark.
Yeah. I mean, he's got that element of Tony but still being his own person.
Yeah, it's interesting because Dominic Cooper has spent the most time playing this role, with guest starring on 2 seasons of Agent Carter under his belt as well. It'll be interesting when we get to Civil War, when we actually get to a version of Howard Stark that is written by the same writers as the character who is written here. Because obviously, like in Iron Man 2, when he shows up, he is not.
It's just so standoffish.
Yeah, he's not being fully formed. Whereas when we get to Civil War, he is being written by the same person who's written this version of Howard Stark, and they do begin to feel kind of more of a cohesive whole.
Yeah. And
you can see the kind of like growth from this character. But it does also continue that kind of like nice winks and nudges to the previous movies, where you have that scene with Yggdrasil and getting the Tesseract out of the Norse painting. But then you also, from Iron Man 2, come to what we presume is an early prototype of the Stark Expo.
Yes.
So, like, they're tying together the kind of the movies that have gone so far, and it is.
And not just that, like I can't remember what he calls it. He calls it something, but it seems like a precursor to the repulsor tech that Tony uses to fly as Iron Man with the car. And, you know, I understand the car appears in Agent Carter working properly, but when I see it, I think of Lola, which is Agent Coulson's car in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I don't know if that is supposed to be a direct nod or not, but yeah, that's all good fun. I like World's Fairs. I like that they do it in Mask of the Phantasm, the Batman film. I like that they do it in Futurama. I find these kinds of old-timey vision of the future type things very fascinating. There is a cameo there that you can take this, but we have a cute little cameo that ties into Chris Evans' film history. Yes.
So at the very beginning of the World Fair scene, there is a statue of a synthesized man. I don't know what they actually could describe it as, but it is the exact costume of the original Human Torch, who is, along with Namor, one of the kind of 3 original Marvel characters from the 1940s. He is a robot. He would eventually be kind of rebooted as the Human Torch of the Fantastic Four, who Chris Evans obviously played in Fantastic Four and Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Not the same character, but it is a fun little nod.
Yeah, it's cute. It's cute. Especially as it's Chris Evans. Okay, so from this World's Fair, Steve sneaks off to attempt to enlist again. Despite Bucky's wishes, Bucky, ditches him. Well, he doesn't ditch him, he just goes, go for it. And while attempting to enlist this time, he meets Abraham Erskine, who is aware of his multiple attempts, illegal attempts I might add, to enlist, because he's claiming he's from different places to try again. And he doesn't care, and he asks about his motivations, and after they have this nice little heart-to-heart, he approves him for the Strategic Scientific Reserve. So playing Abraham Erskine is Stanley Tucci, something I didn't know when I watched this film. I was just like, oh, Abraham Erskine, and then I later learned it was Stanley Tucci. I was like, oh, cool. Leaving Iron Man 1, you said...
Wait, I am confused here.
What?
You watched this movie and then did not realise
No, I didn't at all.
The man on screen was Stanley Tucci.
I didn't.
And then you were told it was Stanley Tucci, and then you had recognition for Stanley Tucci despite not knowing what he looks like.
I knew he looked like. I was just looking at it, and just something about it just didn't hit me as Stanley Tucci. And he's doing his German accent, which he said is why he took the role. He wanted to do one. Leave me alone. Just talk about how you think he's a better Jensen, okay?
He is an infinitely better Jensen because, Stanley Tucci is a very good actor. I also think he just gets a little bit more personality to him than Jensen does, because obviously Jensen's kind of... A lot of him is kind of like reacting to what Tony does. And also, like, he doesn't have much agency in the story he tells.
He's trying not to steal the scene from Tony, like, literally, and, within the world. Like, he is told to pipe down by this famous billionaire, basically.
Yeah. And then you get this character who not only is trying to make the world a better place, he has noble intentions, is also like atoning for something.
Indeed.
And I think that just makes it a little bit better. Like there's a little bit more there. I'm not going to say he gets an arc. He doesn't get much payoff or anything like that, but
there's just these fun little character moments I think that makes him memorable.
Like it's the drink when he pours them both. He pours them the drink and then goes, oh no, you can't have this, you can't have any fluids before your surgery, and then he drinks it himself because he's allowed to drink because he's not having social say. Like, it's like those kind of things that you don't need to hire an actor of Stanley Tucci's stature to do, but they go a long way to make it a more full role.
He rounds it out a little bit. Like,
yes,
he does a lot with a little. You mentioned he's a toning. He is, of course, a German defector, and he says that great line about people forget the first country the Nazis invaded was their own. During their little talks, he asks Steve if he wants to go kill Nazis, and Steve says he doesn't want to kill anyone. He says, "I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from." And I think that's a great foreshadowing of how, the future of Captain America, even though, despite that name, he is willing to fight his own government because he believes in America, not like the authority that controls it kind of thing. He believes mirrors well with Erskine being a defector.
He believes in the ideals that America stands for, not for...
America!
Yeah, like what the country kind of gets distorted into being.
It represents the version that when it wasn't obnoxious. So Steve begins training with the SSR because Erskine approves of him. And he is by far the worst recruit in this platoon. It's comical. He is a tiny little man surrounded by meatheads. He keeps trying, though, because good for him. He is under the instruction of Colonel Chester Phillips and Peggy Carter. Phillips dislikes Steve, obviously, because he's a tiny little runt, and he just was humouring Erskine, but he doesn't want to pick him. But Steve proves to be more intelligent than his peers, and also much braver. Particularly, he throws himself on a grenade in one of the best scenes in the film. Erskine uses this as proof that he is the man for their super soldier experiment. So we are meeting two characters here, and obviously there's a lot... In this very short scene, there's a lot of cool stuff. But firstly, Tommy Lee Jones as Colonel Chester Phillips. Roles like this suit him right down to the ground, because he is the sternest man walking the earth.
It's another one. It's like Stanley Tucci. You don't need to hire Tommy Lee Jones for the role of Gruff General. It's also the role that... Or Colonel, sorry. It's also the role that, like, doesn't need to exist beyond this kind of, like, opening scene, but you can kind of tell that, like, when they got someone of Tommy Lee Jones' stature, they kind of, like, went, like, oh, he'll be in it more than he probably should be in it.
We'll write him some more scenes.
Yeah, but again, it's exactly like Stanley Tucci, where you have an actor of this stature who kind of brings more to the role than is on the page, and it makes it that much more enjoyable just getting to see him do things.
Yeah.
Like, again, there's no arc here. He doesn't get to do a lot, but he is good at what he does.
Yes. I like his dry wit, and I like his kind of early open hatred of Steve that persists through his transformation, which we're getting to.
Thing is, I like that he very quickly kind of like comes round. Like, when he sees that Steve is capable, he's just like, fine. Like, when Steve is capable, he's not gonna like deny that he is capable. Like, he not admits that he's wrong, but he does just go like, no, this is clearly the person for this job.
It's war. There's no time to have an ego about it. Like they need what they need. Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter. She beat out basically the elite of the British actresses that get cast in everything. Alice Eve, Gemma Arterton, Keira Knightley, and Rosamund Pike. Emily Blunt turned this role down as well. So, I mean, she accepted Black Widow and then had to pull out. She just flat out turned down being Peggy Carter. I could have seen her as this, but Haley Atwell is tremendous.
Yeah, Haley Atwell is the best love interest that Marvel have done so far. She's easily the best of the love interests in Phase 1. As much chemistry as Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow, that is her name. Yeah, Haley Atwell's just got this kind of like easy, unassuming chemistry with Chris Evans that is astounding. The scene when Steve comes out of the machine and she just kind of like puts her hand up to touch his abs and then takes her hand away is one of the most kind of like humane moments in all of these Marvel movies.
100%. And
it's just absolutely wonderful. There's other scenes later on, but I'm sure we'll get to that scene later on. I just want to talk about it at length. But yeah, Haley Atwell you can tell why they saw this performance and said, we need to give you more for this role. We need to give you like the one shot on the 2-season TV show. Like, it's a shame that not more people watched it because she is a charisma force. She's fantastic as Peggy Carter. Like, the best work that any female character's had to do so far. There will be better work coming up in later movies who get more to do, but for now, Haley Atwell is the gold standard for female characters in the MCU at this point because she's capable. She doesn't put up with your shit.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing she does is knock out the sort of star recruit, or knock him down with a punch. So That's fun. Yeah, so much enthusiasm for this character. People, like, willed Agent Carter into existing, essentially. Yeah.
Can I take a moment to talk about Lex Shrapnel as Gilmore Hodge?
Sure.
This character feels so weird. It feels like there has to be some kind of payoff to him that was cut from this movie, because there's a lot of reaction shots of him to things, and I don't think he actually gets to say anything. Like, he's in Italy when Captain America makes his his first proper appearance as Captain America, but there's nothing really that comes of it. It's just,
it kind of shows the journey of the generic grunt versus Steve, who is pure of spirit.
Sure, but it feels like he probably got more lines in some version of this movie, but the fact that they keep on going back to him, and then, like, he doesn't get a redemption moment, he doesn't get to join the group of the Howling Commandos and, like, gets a payoff moment or anything like that, or doesn't get to be a hero and prove that he isn't just the grunt that's bullying Steve.
I think it would have rung very true to the character if Steve had been so nice to him and, like, invited him to be in that group, like, didn't hold any ill will towards him at all, because that's who Steve is. I could see that. So, when I think about this movie, there are 3 scenes that come to mind. One we'll obviously be talking about at the end. The other 2 are, I mean, it's kind of one scene, but the flagpole challenge, where they're all trying to climb it, and Steve just walks along and takes the pin out and gets the flag off that way and gets his free ride back to the base, and him leaping on that grenade.
Yes.
So effective. Very just fun, easy visual filmmaking that you know who this character is and you just love him. You adore him. Chris Evans is so good in that falling on the grenade scene. My word.
Yeah, it really reinforces, like, why Steve Rogers is the choice, because he doesn't think like a soldier. He has a different way of looking at things because of his past experiences, and that is what makes him the perfect Captain America, because he isn't coming at it from a hoorah, I am the big man who's going to, like, save the world. He's coming at it from a I'm going to save the people kind of angle.
He wants to help people. He doesn't want to fight others. He wants to protect people. Just one key line before we move on. Erskine says, you know, not a perfect soldier, but a good man. You know, we are really hitting you over the head with this idea that he is not just muscles. He's just a good person who happens to have big muscles. So Steve is taken to a secret facility by Peggy. They have a nice little meet-cute thing in the car. He is injected with the super soldier serum and exposed to Vita rays, whatever you want to say, by Howard Stark. These transform him into a tall, muscular, perfect, dreamy, sexually attractive man. Unfortunately, Schmidt has learned of Erskine's whereabouts and sends the undercover assassin Heinz Kruger, straight from a German name dictionary, to blow up the facility, and he kills Erskine. Sad. Steve chases him on foot and sort of revels in his new physical abilities. Catches Kruger, who swallows a cyanide capsule after warning him about Hydra. So on the car ride over there, they establish this thing about dancing. Has he ever been dancing? He's waiting for the right partner. All this stuff. It's all going to be important. He kind of says something which, I mean, it's the 40s, but, you know, he says that thing about why would you want to fight if you're a good-looking woman, and it's a bit like, Steve, I thought you were supposed to be a very nice man. But look, this is what we're here for. Steve emerging from that thing. Muscular as hell, a scene that has been parodied a lot and recreated and referenced, and he just looks impossibly big. I don't know if he's this big again in other ones. I don't know if it's just this one scene and his posture that just makes him look enormous. But you mentioned Peggy, you know, gives him that little touch and then recoils away. 100% improvised by Haley Atwell, and she said she almost broke character doing it. Just because she said, yeah, quite rightfully, she was just very taken by his physique and wanted to touch him. And yeah, it's a very good humanising moment. It's a moment that I feel if they'd done it deliberately, it wouldn't have seemed as authentic, where it would be kind of like, oh, like, you know, schoolgirl type thing. But she just plays it very, you know, she maintains her dignity.
Yeah, I just wanted to look up who edited this movie. It was Jeffrey Ford, who will then go on to edit Avengers, Iron Man 3, Winter Soldier, Age of Ultron, and Civil War. So obviously, someone who's doing very good work.
Yes.
I think it takes a good editor to look at the kind of, like, the tape that you probably had to abort to then go, this is the take we need for our movie.
You can see a laugh coming like a second later.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, yeah, so special props to him. He obviously gets along well with the Marvel movies, especially when you look at the movies he's done after this. He's obviously very good at doing this kind of thing. The whole transformation scene is always iconic. It's something that's very fundamental to Captain America. It's something I feel like is done in a lot of versions of this story. Like, they even did it in the Spider-Man episodes where Captain America shows up.
Of course. My earliest memories of Captain America.
Yeah. With that tangent, that also gave me very weird knowledge base for Captain America. So I thought he did hang out with a bunch of other superheroic people who were also very old at some point. So...
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Oh, God! No, you're unlocking parts of my brain vault that I didn't know were there still.
Yeah, so the idea that, like, Captain America doesn't actually hang out with a team of OAP superheroes was...
Good stuff. So Peggy shoots one of these Hydra agents in the taxi. I like that. You know, before Steve chases down Kruger on foot, like, Peggy just gaps this dude from long range.
She almost takes down Kruger as well.
She does.
Before Steve saves her life. But, like, her thought isn't, I was going to get hit by that car. It was, I almost had him.
Yes.
She is that ultra-confident, cool, calm, collected, in the face of danger person. Like, we'll forget that she almost was definitely going to die, even if she had killed him. She's more miffed that she didn't get the shot.
Indeed. So Heinz Kruger is played by Richard Armitage just before, you know, he becomes a name that people would know. He had been in Robin Hood. He had been in Spooks, I think.
Yes.
You may now know him from the Hobbit trilogy, but yeah, they got him in here for like this really throwaway scene. This is full of like pre-famous people. He has aquaphobia, which sucks for him because he has to film a scene where he gets in a little submarine and gets pulled out of it by Steve, so sucks.
You should take swimming lessons from that small boy.
Oh, God, that line. I like the foot chase in general. I like Steve sort of realising, hey, I'm fast now. I like him falling over because he's not used to carrying so much weight around and, like, smashing through a window. That is all good stuff. We get that.
I think that it's a little shaky in the kind of green screen of it all when he's running along the 1940 streets of New York, but
running very, very fast. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the physicality of it all kind of like makes it work. But it is one of those things where it's like you get to see some of the shaky green screen that does come back later on in the movie, and I don't think it hurts the movie, but it is one of those things where it's like it's the most obviously fake part of any of these, of this movie and of any of the kind of more realistic ones that's happened so far.
I think he plays it in a very... Chris Evans throughout this does not get enough credit for how good he is in this movie, but he does so many small things like, with his physicality and his expressions, but when he sort of is running and then he looks down at himself and then he runs faster, while it may look like trash, just his look, it's a very believable, oh, I'm fast now moment. It's not corny at all. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that for how weird it looks. And like he jumps over like a 10-foot fence and it's like, okay, rein it in, guys. He's meant to be like Olympic tier athlete, not like superhuman, but never mind. It's very cute when he like picks up the Star Cab Company door as a shield because it's got a little star in the middle. We're almost there, guys. And yeah, we get during this, obviously the tease of Hydra, but we also get the last of the serum being smashed during this chase, which means that any attempts to recreate it have to come from Steve's blood, which explains why all future attempts are imperfect. You know, because why don't you just do it again? How can it go so drastically wrong and create a giant gamma monster? Well, because this. So, despite his new physical abilities, Colonel Phillips rejects Steve as a lab rat, and also he needs to stick around and get experimented on so they can try and do this again. So Phillips and Peggy ship out to war without him. But in steps a Senator Brand to recruit him as a mascot of a promotional tour for War Bonds as Captain America, this costumed mascot character who just, you know, goes around trying to sell insurance bonds and stuff. And yeah, it's... right, well, I just want to throw this in there before we talk about it fully, but Michael Brandon is Senator Brand. Jeff Goldblum was in talks for this role. I could totally see him as a sleazy senator who's like, hey, kid, I'll make you a star. I like this scene. I think it's one I remember showing my father, and he hates America, so he like convulsed, imploded as he saw this Americana like tour of these like chorus girls and all this. I like it. I really like how it repeats and you see Steve improving at his little performance as he goes along. Like he's early on, he's reading off of cards and then he just is doing it smoothly. And we see him, you know, knocking out the fake Hitler, which is fun. And as you referred to at the beginning of this film, art starts imitating life as we kind of do the inverse, where we see the actual Captain America #1, which is inspired by this. He's not a character, but this Captain America persona, and he's in these campy fake films and stuff. I think this is a lot of fun.
I think this scene is pretty much perfect.
Yes.
I think this is how you do a very solid kind of homage to your source material, especially when you think like this is like they've done Captain America in more realistic World War II times, but the stories that Captain America was in the actual World War II era are not the kind of thing that you want to adapt. But this is the perfect way to reference those early Captain America comics whilst also being like, we are doing something that's more intelligent and more modern in its sensibilities, but we also appreciate that this is the roots of the character and this is very important.
The era of Superman getting cats out of trees and Batman saying nice things to kids. Like it, and like the costume is perfect for like what it is. Like so it's kind of campy and shitty, and
it's exactly what this movie needs, because it honors the roots of the character in the best way possible without throwing away the fact that we are watching something that is grounded and more realistic and modern.
So this tour takes him to Italy, where there is a real war. And there are actual soldiers who are not even remotely impressed by him, and they just laugh him off the stage and demand the girls come back. A lot of fun there. And I like that he isn't like offended by it. He's like, well, I can see, because he's a people pleaser. That's who Steve is. He's a sub. Anyway, he's sorry. He is reunited with...
See, I was trying to find a way to like reference the censored but I feel like Steve Rogers is a sub who's...
He's got to be, right? I mean, anyway, he's reunited with Peggy and Phillips after hearing that Bucky's division... Remember Bucky from earlier? His division are either dead or missing. And Phillips isn't going to do much about it because he said they'd lose more people than they save, and he just dismisses Steve as a chorus girl, which is a delightfully dickish line, delivered expertly by Tommy Lee Jones. So Steve storms off. He is still wearing his costume. He sort of adds a jacket, adds some more suitable boots. Peggy gives him a better helmet. He takes his shield. He sort of, he blends it into a more practical costume, and he heads off to rescue these survivors by himself. I like that part of this is predicated on establishing subtly that Steve has an eidetic memory. He kind of glances on a board where this camp is and he decides, I'm going to go there. I don't know if he's supposed to have had this before he changed or if it's just one of the many things he's now perfect at, but it is a plot point in the history of Captain America that he has a photographic memory, and it will come up again in this film.
I just want to mention two things, which is one, I really like the touch of him drawing the monkey.
Yeah, he's an artist as well, yes.
Yeah, it's a nice little callback to the fact that Captain America in the comics is a comic book artist, which I really appreciate. Like, it's those kind of subtle references that I think this movie has a love of Captain America's source material, and you can feel it in almost every single scene in this movie.
This film, I feel, is like bleeding with Captain America in a way that the other films are not.
Yes.
With their characters. And I guess that's why these dudes won the job of go-to writers. Because they got it. I think there's a deleted scene in Avengers where he's drawing as well, isn't there?
Yes, I believe so. And the other thing is, we also start the trend of, like, this is the second costume he has in the movie, which is also the second, like, really effective costume that he has. Yeah. And in the history of Captain America costumes, there's only one that I have serious issues with. But
we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. But, like, I do think that the Captain America costuming across all these movies is absolutely fantastic and absolutely on point. Yeah. There are other ones where they get very subtle changes in other movies, but the Captain America one, like, no matter how drastic the costume change is, it normally is grounded and just really does empathize the tone and what the scene or what they need the costume to do in that particular moment.
Yeah. It's just smart. It's like blending his goofy, fake, over-the-top costume with something practical, and, like, you still get the Captain America-ness, but he doesn't look like a complete ridiculous clown in his full costume.
Yeah, and it's like the leather biker jacket. And...
Yeah. I like that when he's storming that base, he fights smart and he is stealthy because, one, he is not trained despite his new physical abilities. Like, he doesn't know how to fight, really. I mean, he knows in theory you punch the dude in the face, and now if he does that, it works. But I like that is a necessity. And two, he's massively outnumbered. He's in this giant base. And it's something that will really fine-tune in Winter Soldier. And it's interesting to see that even as he gets more training, he does keep this really cool visual style of fighting where he is smart, he is stealthy, he sneaks, he moves silently, and he's smart about how he fights because he's a smart dude.
I think it is important at this point to say, like, this movie is not... I think the fight choreography is not as good, no. Is not as good as where it goes in the future, and I think, like, Joe Johnston was hired for this movie because he'd done The Rocketeer, and because he knows how to do that kind of, like, dripping World War II feel of a movie, and he isn't there for the action choreography, and I don't think the action choreography is important to this movie. No. I think there are some nice action set pieces, but like when I think of this movie, like it's not the fights, it's the chemistry, it's the tone, it's the style, and Joe Johnston absolutely nails that. Yeah. And
it's war. You don't need a dude who can do martial arts. You just need a guy who is hearts and minds, who is a force of will, a cult of personality. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I love the line about when he comes across these captured men, and he's like, you know, are you sure you're okay? And he's like, I've knocked out Adolf Hitler over 200 times. That's perfect. So Steve successfully frees these captives. He finds Bucky, who is sort of strapped to this table, and he'd been experimented on by Arnim Zola. It's done very quickly, and for such an important plot point, I don't know, just not a huge amount was made of it, because he's seemingly fine after this, but we'll get into it. Steve then comes across Schmidt for the first time, who, after a little fight with him, he takes off his mask and reveals himself as Red Skull, and they trade barbs before Schmidt and Zola, like, flee the base, and there's a big explosion. So the first thing there is, you know, we're foreshadowing Bucky coming back as the Winter Soldier. At the time, unless you are intimately familiar with these characters, it probably struck you as quite an odd scene. But, you know, we know where it's going to go. I think Schmidt's, like, physical abilities, they're not, like, fully explored, and I can't decide whether that's good or bad, because obviously the serum didn't work as it was meant to, but he clearly has some degree of heightened physical strength and everything. And I don't know if it's good that, you know, it doesn't matter that they're not like, oh, he's so strong, or if it's bad that they don't define the parameters of this character.
I just took the implication that the serum worked, it just made his face fucked up.
I guess, yeah.
like that was basically it. The serum did the thing where it's supposed to amplify whatever natural leanings you had.
I hate that kind of dialogue, where it suggests some sort of, like, altered meaningful. Anyway,
yeah, but like I think the basic gist of it is that, like, Captain America and Red Skull are fundamentally, like, equal in terms of strength and abilities, but because Red Skull had an early version of it, he gets the Red Skull.
Because he's not a chicken shit, like, you know, he talks big, but in the fight he gets owned kind of character. Like, he can sort of handle himself. It's just, he's just this deplorable human. Like,
yeah, you see him take the punch, and all the punch does is kind of, like, shifts his mask a little bit.
Yeah. So Schmidt abandons this mask as part of a speech about leaving humanity behind and how he's not afraid of it and he's embracing it. It's like, dude, you're doing this for the first time because we've just seen you walking around with this mask at almost all times. So I think you're just being stubborn here and you just hate Captain America, but hey-ho. And then that, like, escape scene, it just sort of rings a false drama as Steve has to jump across this thing and during the explosion.
Well, I mean, there's a reason they cut away from it. Like, they don't show him triumphantly making it. They just kind of, like, cut away because it's like, I like it because it feels like one of those old-timey serials. Like, it feels like the kind of conclusion to one of those where, like...
Yeah, there's a lot of jumping across, like, gangways and stuff in these old things.
Yeah, but, like, it's like, it cuts off and then, like, that's the end, that's the cliffhanger serial, and then you have to tune in next week to find out what happens, and then the next week it's like them triumphantly making it back to camp.
True.
The tone of it, I think it's very much spot on. I think it does a lot of interesting editing choices, one of which is going to come up momentarily in terms of, like, what they do with the quote-unquote plot of the movie.
Yes. So after marching all these captured soldiers back to the base camp, Steve is welcomed back as a hero. Everyone applauds. Thanks to him taking note of all the locations of the Hydra facilities when he was there. Again, eidetic memory. He becomes indispensable to Phillips and their operation, and he is given better gear by Howard Stark, including his iconic vibranium shield. I'm going to let you die on your hill now, because Steve is given a medal that he doesn't show up to collect, and one Stan Lee makes his cameo appearance in the audience there as part of the whole Steve's a hero now thing.
I don't think Stan Lee should be in this movie. I think this is early enough in the history of the MCU movies that you do not need Stan Lee to be in every single one of them. It's not like he's been in every single Marvel movie up to this point. He has skipped out on X-Men 2, he skipped out on Elektra, he skipped out on Punisher, he skipped out on Blade. It's not as ubiquitous as people think. It's only because he's in kind of all the big ones that people assume he's in all of these movies. So my main issue here is that while Stan Lee has written Captain America, and while Stan Lee also wrote the issue of Avengers in which Captain America is unfrozen, he did not create the character. That was Jack Kirby and Joe Simon, and he also did not write Captain America in the 1940s World War II era, which is this movie is so enormously indebted to. I don't think it gets away in the plot because I don't think these Stan Lee cameos do, but I do think that of all the cameos, apart from possibly his cameo in Deadpool, this is the one that smacks the most of kind of an insult to the people who created it, especially considering the people who created do not have the best relationship with Stan Lee or with Marvel in and of itself. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee had a notoriously bad relationship all the way up to Jack Kirby's death, and Joe Simon obviously rejected a cameo role in this movie, but he had sued Marvel twice for the ability to gain money from this character who he created and who Marvel has been profiting off since the 1940s.
If only he'd been as big of an asshole as Bob Kane, you know?
Yeah, comic history is littered with people who do not get credit for the stuff and work that they've done. Stan Lee is one of the very few people who does get a lot of credit for what they've done, even though because of this credit he gets too much credit for his stuff. And whilst I do think that Jack Kirby is becoming more and more ubiquitous with people who are educated, I do think you speak to people, they'll go, oh, they're all Stan Lee creations, and I don't support anything that reinforces the notion that Stan Lee made everything Marvel and therefore Stan Lee is the greatest, because Stan Lee is not the greatest and Stan Lee did not make Captain America, and this cameo just reinforces that notion, which I think hurts the work of other better creators, especially when people who have done great work with the character, stuff like Ed Brubaker, who gets a cameo in Winter Soldier, that cameo is not as shone with as bright a spotlight as the Stan Lee cameos are.
No. And real talk, a lot of these characters Stan Lee invented, he wrote page one concept. He didn't. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Stan Lee, who to date this podcast has recently been revealed to be not the nicest man. So let's talk about Steve getting his new gear. Before things turn badly, he gets some more cute dialogue with Peggy. They again bring up this talk of dancing. It's all fun, but then
and fondue.
And fonduing. I left that part out. It's a pun that I think they think is, or a joke that I think they think is funnier than it is, unless you really like it. I don't know.
I think it's funny when Dominic Cooper gets to deliver it. I don't think it's quite as good with Hayley Atwell and Chris Evans.
No. But who comes along to ruin this chemistry but one Natalie Dormer, Marjorie Tyrell, as a blonde, smooching one Steve Rogers, which Peggy sees and is furious with him, which we'll see moments later as he gets this shield, and in an amazing, amazing moment, what does Peggy do when Steve holds up this shield that is allegedly bulletproof?
She shoots him 3 times.
Indeed. It's intense and it's great and I love it.
It's her reaction afterwards where she just kind of goes it works, and then...
What if it hadn't? She just shot him dead right there. Because, fine, he kissed someone else, but that would have been an overreaction if you'd murdered him. It's a lot of fun. We get I doubt anyone remembers hearing that this shield is made of vibranium, but Black Panther is due out relatively soon when we record this, and that will, of course, be a big thing there, I would imagine. It's just cool seeing him kitted out. He gets a better version of the suit again.
The now standard version, I feel like this is the version of the suit that has been in the most...
In my head, it's the same suit every time. If you show me them side by side, I'm like, oh yeah, they're different. But I can't at first glance just be like, oh, that's a different suit than
this
last time.
This is the basic fundamental suit that he'll be wearing in most of the future movies.
It's remarkably well redesigned, because to this day he's not drawn like this, really. I mean, occasionally, but like they still go to the, like, they've toned it down from like winged boots and everything, but the blue is lighter, and it's just something about it. Just this suit just looks so good on screen, adapted from the comic book pages. So Steve forms his own unit. They're called the Howling Commandos in the script, but that's never said. Bucky and a bunch of these dudes that he rescued, and they start taking out all these facilities, and Red Skull is all like, ah, these damn kids, kind of. Unfortunately, while capturing Arnim Zola, Bucky is knocked out of a moving train and plummets into the cold water, where he is presumed dead.
A lot happens in not very much time.
Indeed. I love this little montage. There is
It's great. It's the second best montage in the movie, but it's still, this movie is not afraid to just burn through things that...
Yeah, I mean, it's a war, like, you know, show that he didn't do one deed and become a hero. Like, he was a guy that did many things and helped with this war effort. So his Howling Commandos, you got Neil McDonough as Dum Dum Dugan, one of the worst names. Derek Luke as Gabe Jones.
Oh, the best name. Best name.
Yeah, him and Fin Fang Foom. Derek Luke as Gabe Jones, Bruno Ricci as Jacques Dernier, JJ Field as James Montgomery Falsworth, and the one I want to talk about, because I don't think any of those performances bear any real mention other than Dum Dum Dugan's heroic mustache and bowler hat, Kenneth Choi as Jim Morita. He gets to play his own grandson in Spider-Man Homecoming, and has a picture of his character in this movie framed on his desk, and I think that is so cool. He did a ton of research before auditioning for this, and he read some scenes from Saving Private Ryan, and I'm really happy that he got to do this role. He doesn't really do a whole lot, but it's cool that he got to be in it, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting, because like, you look at the credit list, and Derek Luke gets a higher billing than Kenneth Choi.
Well, he just played Puff Daddy, so...
But I feel like Kenneth Choi is more instantly recognisable. Yeah. And maybe that's just me coming from TV where I've seen Sons of Anarchy and stuff like that at this point. But like, it does feel like Jim Morita is the one that gets more to do later on. And
he is the one in this group that, other than Bucky, that I remember and like I'm drawn to. I mean, I guess Dum Dum Dugan as well, because I know who Neil McDonough is. But you know, these other dudes to me are kind of faceless, and I remember Kenneth Choi as Jim Morita. Yeah,
but I think only two of them show up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it's Kenneth Choi and Neil McDonough, which I mean, maybe also lends to me being like, those are the two Howling Commandos that I remember the most. But like, it's weird that someone else gets a higher billing in the cast list than Kenneth Choi.
Well,
especially I think Derek Luke's the one who plays the Gabe Jones is the one who's the grandfather of another character in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I mean, my memory of what I've seen of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't good, so I'm going to say sure. I like that montage, as I said. I like the bomb under the truck. I like Bucky being a sniper. All that stuff is good. Short and sweet, like, as you said, they kind of burn through a lot of what could be drawn out. There's the pretty gross, like, hey, 3D's a thing, shot where he like, throws the shield at the camera.
2011, folks, when people were basically post-converting movies into 3D.
I couldn't be more glad that 3D is dying. Like, anyway, so Bucky goes in the water, which, you know, will lead to him becoming the Winter Soldier later. And, like, you know, if you know anything about this character, you know this is where this is going. But I wonder if, as a fresh viewer, you're like, this is a little bit flat. Like, has he done enough to make an impression for you to care beyond the fact that Steve has lost his best friend?
I remember watching it with someone who didn't know that Bucky was coming back, and her reaction was like, I was shocked when he died, and me and another comic book friend had to explain to her that, like, oh no, he's coming back, that's part of, like, the overall plot of it. But, like, I don't know if it worked on the emotion level, because I think the person who was reacting like that likes Sebastian Stan from Once Upon a Time. But
indeed. Well, be prepared to be moist whenever you see him on screen, folks. You get the stuff with Peggy consoling Steve. That's a nice little scene. He reveals he can't get drunk. Bummer, dude. I didn't really want to talk about it, but I just have jotted it down. Tommy Lee Jones and Toby Jones have this little interrogation scene where he brings him a steak, and of course he doesn't eat meat. Fucking Nazis. It's fine. It's fun. They get to do some acting, I guess.
It's Tommy Lee Jones's biggest acting showcase when he's not just playing like rough. The scene always makes me want to eat steak.
Indeed.
It's also the kind of biggest showcase that Toby Jones gets, because otherwise he's just kind of like cowering a corner, reacting to things that...
He's very good at cowering and reacting.
He's very good at cowering, but also this is the scene that kind of like spins off into Toby Jones's subsequent appearances in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but you don't know that from like where this scene ends.
Yeah.
But like it's arguably a very pivotal scene in the kind of grander scheme of things, but it's nicely subtle.
Indeed. So, using this, what little we get out of this interrogation, Steve launches an assault on the last Hydra base, where we learn that Schmidt is planning to drop bombs on major cities in his crazy sci-fi plane. A lot of like future Nazi tech in this, and I dig that. So Steve boards the ship, battles Red Skull and his men. Red Skull touches the Tesseract and disappears in a bright light. I feel, while it obviously is going to go to a tremendous place, this section of the film for me is pretty flat. I know you're higher on it than I am, but I feel after coming off that cool montage with the Howling Commandos and coming off all that great character work through the first sort of half, it just feels a lot flatter to me.
I do think it's a noticeable dip. Like, I think the kind of energy and momentum that has been there beforehand is kind of gone. I think there's some interesting fights. I think there's some very interesting like technical choices. Like I messaged you when I was watching it and saying like, there hasn't been a single word of dialogue spoken for 5 minutes now.
Yeah,
like from the moment,
I didn't even notice that.
From the moment like Cap jumps on the plane to him having the confrontation with Red Skull, like nothing is said. Like I think the last line that is said is "I'm not going to kiss you," and then no one says anything until Red Skull says like "You're persistent." And it's an interesting choice because obviously like Captain America isn't quippy. He's not Spider-Man.
No, he's not.
And the Nazis are wearing like full-on suits and all the rest of it, and so they're screaming and grunting, but like you just watch this and it's just almost minimalist in a way that like a superhero movie set in the 1940s with future Nazi tech can be minimalist. But it's an interesting design choice. I think it works. I do think it does lead to a slightly lower sense of pace because it almost feels silent, and I think I get what they're doing. They're trying to build up tension to kind of like this final climax, but like it does kind of suck some of the momentum out of the air, which I don't know if it was intentional.
And you talked earlier about like the fight choreography like not being there. I think of this final assault and I think of like men flying like 10 feet from every blow that Cap does, and it's something that very much to me goes against that character, where like I think even Chris Evans said like, if Cap punches you, you're not going to go flying, but it is going to knock you down. And it's like,
the other thing I messaged you was the scene on the bikes was that it's very much like a Power Rangers fight, and you saying people going flying is like, no, this is kind of like a Power Rangers fight from the mid-2000s, like with explosions going off and people flying away from the explosions kind of thing. Like
time and place, Ben. Time and place for that to be good. And like the hangar scene is so clearly CG'd, it hurt me to look at. Like, it's like, these people aren't in a giant hangar. I think it's very cute that the little red button that Tommy Lee Jones pushes has a K on it, because he played Agent K, and the little red button in Men in Black. As you said, the line of "I'm not kissing you," it's like, Tommy Lee Jones, you, above all others, can deliver that line, because, you know, he's a very gruff man. The final fight with Red Skull is so forgettable. Like, neither of them are doing anything fancy. There's not like a huge, like, clever final way to beat him. He just kind of just throws his shield at him, and it knocks him down, and it breaks the casing for the Tesseract. And then, as I said earlier on, he's very clearly, I believe, supposed to be hinted as still being alive, but you know, he's not coming back.
I think it's one of those things where it's like, Captain America is not someone who will very often find someone who is an equal match to him, and in those cases, like, is it going to be an interesting fight if Captain America can just punch you once and you're knocked unconscious? Like, because you've got a scale of things where Captain America is better than normal humans, but there are superhumans who are more powerful than he is, and so it's kind of difficult to find a point on that scale to like have an interesting final fight with Captain America.
I don't know. It's why, to it.
But there isn't much to it at all. I will concede that. But like, you look at Winter Soldier and you look at Civil War, and both of those movies have Cap holding back, or like has a reason to not go for the kill. Whereas this fight is very much like, you are fighting evil incarnate because he's a Nazi, so there's no reason for him to hold back, and so he kind of doesn't. He throws a shield, and then they fight. And because Captain America is Captain America, it's just not interesting because there's no personal stakes there other than I'm going to destroy America, rah, which is something that they need, that is missing from this final fight. And I don't think there's any ways they could have injected it in there. Like, the worst thing they could have done would be the Red Skull kidnaps Peggy and he's fighting to save Peggy's life or something along those lines. Like, I think that would make this scene worse.
Yes.
So this is the lesser of two evils if you're looking at the scene. I will say I absolutely hate that, like, every single plane that you see has an American city written on it. Like, I get it's Captain America, but it's like London, Paris, like, have the Berlin plane on there, like, show that you are actually doing this on a world level, not Chicago, New York. And it's just like, why? That is my issue with that scene, is that, like, sometimes you can tell this movie was funded by Americans. And
well, it's not called Captain Europe, Ben.
I know, but it does.
It is gross. Right, we can stop talking about bad things now because grab a tissue. Steve is unable to land the plane. He realises this, and his only course of action to avoid killing millions of people potentially is to crash that plane into the Arctic where there are no people, and so that nobody's hurt. And he's got Peggy on the radio the whole way down. He puts that locket on the dashboard and he bids his tearful goodbye to Peggy. And we'll talk about that at length. But just as a final little addendum before the next point after all this discussion, Howard Stark later finds the Tesseract, but he is unable to find Steve, and we are sort of left with a very much Captain America is dead. This goodbye scene is stellar. So well done. They both act the shit out of it. Just the stuff like, you know, he doesn't want to be all like, I love you and like goodbye. It's gonna need a rain check on that dance, and they're talking and arranging this date that they both know is never gonna happen. And it's so beautiful, and the way he is cut off mid-sentence, and the camera's not even in him when it happens. Like, you see him on the plane talking, and then you go to Haley Atwell and he's talking and he's just gone, and it's so perfect.
Yeah, I didn't cry when I first saw this in cinemas, but I like watching 2 seasons of Agent Carter when I rewatched this with my girlfriend a year or so ago. Like, I was just in tears, and I teared up again when I watched it. Like, this is a beautiful scene from Haley Atwell. Like, it's almost like she's having to convince herself that they're going to this dance next week more than he is. Like, because you look at Steve, and he almost believes he's going to walk out of this and get to go to the dance with her next week. Yeah. Whereas he
can't help but be that person.
Yeah, whereas she's fighting back tears, talking to someone who she knows is not going to be with her much longer. And, oh God, it's so good, so perfect. The fact that they got this kind of, like, very chaste goodbye kiss not so long ago. Like, it felt like she was just kind of going, like, in case you don't come back. And I think this is, like, her realising that, like, no, he isn't coming back. I'm probably never going to see this person again. Superbly acted by both of them, especially considering they're not even in the same bloody room. No. Like this isn't against each other. This isn't, like, the final scene between any of the other actors who have been in these movies so far have with romantic chemistry. Yeah, Chris Evans and Haley Atwell have chemistry up the Yahoo. Like, it's frankly offensive that we only get this one movie of the two of them together, really.
Yeah. Haley Atwell will break our hearts again. Haley Atwell will be a badass again, but unfortunately it's goodbye. I always thought of Stark getting the Tesseract as kind of a planting the seeds of the arc reactor in his mind kind of thing. I don't know if that is intentional or if I'm just seeing 2 blue energy sources and making my own connection, but you know, we do learn in Iron Man 2 that he and Ivan Vanko's dad invented the arc reactor, so maybe.
I mean, possibly. I'm just intrigued, like, where do they keep the Tesseract?
Who knows? So we get what seems like the natural conclusion of this film. We see children playing on the street, saying, you know, being Captain America. Oh, after Peggy looks at that picture of skinny Steve and just, oh, perfect. Yeah, you know, the music swells, kids are playing, we fade to black, only to come back to Steve in a hospital room. You know, in New York, and you know, it's still clearly the 1940s. Like, there's old-timey stuff everywhere, and then he very quickly deduces that something isn't right because the baseball game playing on the radio is one he attended. It's a very cool sort of like a sort of era for novels that did this kind of thing, and like he breaks out of the room, and it's like a room in a bigger room, and it's all fake skyline, all this, and he eventually emerges out of all these corridors and everything. And he ends up on Times Square. And, props to S.H.I.E.L.D. for having a facility right on Times Square. That can't be cheap. And Nick Fury approaches him and tells him he's been asleep for 70 years. A striking thing about this, we talked about this beforehand, and there were rumours that they wanted Scarlett Johansson to come in and be Black Widow here. I would say it would immediately take you out of what they're attempting to do here. Not that, the first thing you see in this movie is him coming out of the ice wearing the costume, and he's just gone into ice and he's no longer wearing the costume, so something should be up in your head. But I think if it were Black Widow here, it would kill what they're attempting to go for.
The thing is, they do the reveal about 2 seconds later. I just think having her there would have added the cognitive dissonance of it all, just being like, because the person who plays the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent there looks so much like her that it's almost distracting. And it's just like, if it had been Black Widow, like, you just get this moment of kind of like, something's not right. You then get to be in Cap's headspace as well, where like he knows something's wrong because the radio's wrong, and then something's not right because you've got Scarlett Johansson wearing 1940s S.H.I.E.L.D. gear. I don't think it hurts the reveal because you just know there's going to be something, but like that's talking hypotheticals of whatnot. The only thing I think it would have helped really with is Scarlett Johansson would have been in all 3 Captain America movies if it had been the case.
Would have been nice.
Sadly, she's only in 2 of them.
Indeed. I love that he outsmarts S.H.I.E.L.D. despite their painstaking efforts to perfectly replicate this room. They got the fucking year wrong. It would have been something. I guess he's doing this for years, so it's hard to say it was months. They missed by a week or something, but it's just funny that and I love when Cap figures something out. It's something that will come up over the course of several movies, but just Chris Evans plays it with this conviction of hey, don't fuck around with me here. I'm not dumb.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I feel like I like to imagine the person who's just I've got a collection of old tiny baseball games from the 1940s. We'll play one of these for him, and then he picks his favourite one, and then he puts it on and goes Cap will never get this, and he's just oh fuck, I spoiled it for everyone. It would be great if it turned out that was the Pac-Man guy or the Gallagher guy from Avengers.
One assumes that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s play here was to ease him in, but he sees right through it, and we get the shock. And Samuel L. Jackson making his traditional cameo as Nick Fury, talks to him very on the level, doesn't talk down to him or anything. Again, he continues to be fine. He doesn't actually get to do anything until the Avengers, I think, realistically, is what I've learned from these early cameos.
Yeah, this is his 4th appearance in the role? Yeah, so he's appeared in all the big ones so far, apart from Hulk. Apart from Iron Man 2 being relegated to nothing but kind of post-credit cameos. So he is not working with much. No.
And then the final line of the movie is Chris Evans delivering this. He's like, are you going to be alright? He's like, yeah, I had a date, and looking around and because Steve reacts and adapts and just keeps rolling. That's who he is. So on some level he knows, he must have been putting this together, but it's that moment where it sets in for him that fuck, everyone I know is dead. Peggy is gone. And it's haunting, final moment. So, and then after the credits, we get a very short scene directly out of the Avengers, directed by Joss Whedon, I assume, where Steve is punching a punching bag, and Nick Fury approaches him about what is going to happen in the Avengers, and then we get a trailer for the Avengers, and everyone loses their fucking mind.
That is a scene from the Avengers. It's literally a scene
straight out of it.
But it's the aspect ratio is really weird.
Yeah. It looks completely different.
Yeah, it looks completely different, but also there's black bars all around the screen. It's this is unfinished footage, isn't it? That you've just kind of gone this is what we've got so far. Just shove it at the end there. Yeah. So this is the first and only Marvel movie without a traditional post-credit scene.
Yeah, it's very. I guess the hype was we've got the fucking trailer, but yeah, the scene itself is. Because the trailer doesn't interest me now watching that, but it feels a bit flat. So that's the whole movie. I predicted this would either take 8 times as long or identically as long. I think it took a little bit longer than normal, but I think it was good stuff. I have just a couple of miscellaneous things that we didn't get to, and then we'll get out of here. So obviously Stan Lee does a cameo, Jenna Coleman does a cameo, Reb Brown, who played Captain America on a TV serial, sits next to Stan Lee. Joe Simon obviously turned down a cameo. Allegedly, at one point or another, they wanted cameos for Wolverine, Magneto, and Namor, who were all Captain America era like they were all around in World War II, like canonically. Like Namor fought alongside Cap, and I think they might have at some point retconned Wolverine to have been friends with Cap before. I don't know.
Yes, Wolverine and Captain America have fought together in World War II.
Yes, that's kind of crazy in a world where this stuff was far from possible at that point. Baron Zemo and Baron von Strucker were both at one point in the film and got cut. They will both appear later. I think it's a good thing they got cut because there's a lot of characters in play in this film already, and I think bloating it with extra characters when they're fighting the literal Nazis was not necessary. Right, so we got 3 standard segments that we do before we get out of here. Villain Watch is the easiest one to do, I think. Red Skull, I think it's neither good nor bad. Like, there's really nothing. He doesn't get a huge amount of screen time. He doesn't need much to him. He's a fucking Nazi.
He's a Nazi, so he doesn't have to do anything. Hugo Weaving could do this role in his sleep.
Yeah.
Sadly, it feels like he does do it in his sleep.
Indeed. Obviously, it's not Loki. Obviously, it's not Justin Hammer. I think it's probably actually even below Obadiah Stane, to be honest.
I'd put them on a level. I think Jeff Bridges is obviously having more fun, but I do think that the physicality of this role is so much like this is the Red Skull.
Yeah.
No matter how you cut it, like the makeup is fantastic.
Yeah.
He looks like he does in the comic books. He talks like he does in the comic books. He's a Nazi. He does Nazi things.
Yeah.
But then you get to the question of like, is the Red Skull really that interesting a villain to kind of do it? And he's a good shorthand for what this movie needs, but he's not necessarily interesting on a personal or character level to transcend the character.
So like with this, the reason we do this segment is people always say like all the Marvel villains suck except Loki. We've proved Justin Hammer is good. And I would say this one isn't like bad to the point you would say that about this. Just he doesn't do anything to stand out, but I don't think he like is a weakness of the film by any means.
Well, when I was comparing it to Conker's Bad Fur Day earlier, it's that kind of thing where like he feels like he's almost in a different movie for some of it. Yes. Where like he's got his own subplot, and it feels like if the movie didn't have as much to do as it did, you might get a little bit more his actual personal relationship to the actual Nazi party and like what he's doing, rather than just the first half of his movie is we are separate from the Nazi party now, and now we are reacting to Captain America, and like there's no journey there. He's just being evil for evil's sake, which.
Do you think they'd ever bring him back? Like, obviously not Hugo Weaving. I mean, Stranger Things.
I think Hugo Weaving said that he would be willing to return to the role, but I think the Marvel Universe has moved on so far now that, like, we probably won't see it. Like, if we did, it would probably end up being in one of the next 2 Avengers movies. He'd probably be, like, something that, like, Thanos has got on his wall or something.
Yeah,
like,
maybe. That'd be cool. So, right, our next segment, good third act, bad third act. This is an interesting one because I think we need to define what people think of when they talk about good and bad third acts, because in a literal sense, the last sort of third of this film, you look at Steve putting that plane in the water and that beautiful scene, you look at that surprise, he's in New York stuff, all of that is great. But that fight with Red Skull, man, like, and is that what people talk about when they say it's a bad third act? Are they talking about the final fight? Because I think a lot of these films do have a bad final fight. I would say my instinct is overall this is the best third act we've got so far. But I do look at that stuff just before the really good stuff and think, eh.
I think it's weird. As an emotional climax to the movie, I think this is pretty much perfect. Like, I think it nails exactly what the movie needs to do. As a action climax and like plot climax, I don't think it functions on that level. And luckily, I think because the emotion hits as hard as it does, I do think that overall I'm very positive on this third act. I do think the third act is the weakest of the 3 acts in this movie. I think Act 1 is tremendous, Act 2 is tremendous, Act 3 has good.
Tremendous things in it.
Yeah, and has tremendous things in it. I think this Act 3 finishes really strong. I think once Red Skull is dispatched, the scene with Peggy, the scene where he takes her down to the ice, even the 3 little kind of stingers of like people doing things afterwards, like the kid holding the dustbin lid with the Captain America shield painted on it, is one of those great good iconic moments. I think another Disney movie recently has done it better.
Then you will summon them. You will summon the Last Jedi haters.
Has done it better recently, but yeah. And then the scene set in the present day is good, but like that final fight is not as good, it's not as fun. Like, the siege on the weapons facility earlier on in the movie is a lot better than the siege on the Alps hideout.
Yeah.
But I would overall say I think this is a good third act. I think it's better than Iron Man 2, it's better than Iron Man 1, it's better than Incredible Hulk. There's room to debate whether or not it's better than Thor, but
I think
America made me
Thor
cry,
is like it doesn't take a dip, like it remains even keel. Whereas Cap, while it takes a dip initially, it brings something new in that final. It brings something new to the table that elevates, and as you said, it makes you cry. So I mean, that says a lot. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think it just depends on what your definition of a third act means. If you mean like the final boss battle, then I guess this is a bad one. But if you're just talking about like how you close your story out, I think it does it really well. Finally, outstanding performance nominees. So this segment has been kind of getting away from us, you have probably heard. The goal here is to identify who is giving a like all Marvel performance here, like who needs to be called out as doing great stuff. And we will be nominating one person from each film unless we feel collectively no one is worthy of that nomination. We're kind of tentatively reserving the right to knock someone back after first putting them forward, but we'll see about that. So far we've got Robert Downey Jr. from Iron Man 1. We saved one from Incredible Hulk because no one in that came out of it well. Sam Rockwell for Iron Man 2, and tentatively I argued Ben into getting Loki forward. I may take that away later, I don't know.
So I want to put forward Hayley Atwell.
Are you doing that because of Agent Carter?
No, I'm doing it because I genuinely think that she is doing tremendous work in this movie, and I think she gets a TV show out of it. Yes, that is impossible to kind of like underestimate, but like her level of charisma is so off the chart in this movie, and I think she is doing something that no other female side character has done, which is making an indelible impact onto the rest of the character. Like, I am not interested in seeing Steve get with anyone. I don't want to see him get with Sharon Carter or whatever her surname is in the modern day storyline. Like, she is still, to me, even though she's only in one more scene or two more scenes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like the heart of the Captain America movies in a lot of ways. And this is the only time that she gives a performance that's more than a cameo. And yeah, I think she is absolutely wonderful. The chemistry with Chris Evans is fantastic. Chris Evans is better in later movies. I think he's more confident in the role. But for someone coming in, knocking it out of the park, and then going away for a movie, like, she is up there with Justin Hammer. Is that, like, they're only there for one movie, but they are so iconic and so important to the tapestry of what the MCU is that I cannot underestimate, like, how good she is in this role.
Absolutely. I, like you, I have, I put Chris Evans question mark, and I just thought to myself, like, he's absolutely underrated in this. I think he's absolutely underrated overall. I think he surpasses Tony as the character to care about over time.
He has the most development of any of these characters.
Yeah.
The Captain America trilogy is the strongest trilogy that Marvel had going for it.
Yeah, totally.
And this is a fantastic first entry into that trilogy.
Yeah. As you said, he will be better. I think Hayley Atwell, that role is completely deserved. Part of me considered saying, because we have this interest in saving performances so that we can nominate two people from future movies, and I thought there is some sort of argument to be made that I think this is the best rounded cast, certainly, of these movies we've had so far. Iron Man 1 has these 4 heavy hitters, but there's not very many other characters and there's not much to it, and this is such a team effort. I think there's no one, I don't think, in this who's notably bad. There's so many good but not great performances in this, and I thought, if we needed to, we could do that. But I am behind you on this pick of Hayley Atwell, because that final scene alone, but she does good stuff throughout, and the touching of the chest.
Yeah, the touching of the chest, the shooting of the shield, the reaction to dancing. I just think she does. Yeah, she does so much with. I mean, she gets more to do than Gwyneth Paltrow and Natalie Portman and definitely Liv Tyler. That the fact that she is the only one of these that doesn't get to come back as a love interest full time is a travesty. Yes. Really. I get that it's for plot reasons, and I do think it makes sense, but it is a shame that the person who is arguably the least famous of these kind of 4 actresses to start these movies off with is the one that just completely acts them all out the water. And as you said, the cast is all really, really good. And it's one of those things where you start to see the start of Marvel going this kind of TV avenue where they go for actors who
are on the rise.
But have good chemistry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these actors are from British TV projects, as you've probably gathered from who they all are. but they're all good and they all know what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. So this went a lot longer than I anticipated, but there's so much to talk about in this one. This is like a very underrated film, in my opinion. I think it's the best film we've seen so far, easily.
Yeah.
So, next week, we will be talking about the Avengers. The podcast will probably be 4 hours long.
Oh, yeah, if you thought this one was long, Avengers will be twice as long, because...
Well, I feel like... no, I was going to say I feel less happens, but that's not true at all. I don't know how we're going to do it. We're going to do it. But until then, go to entertherealworld.com. That's 2 E's, Enter the Real World Film. Yeah. Check out all of our written content. Check out the other podcasts from Broadcast Depth. Our Lost podcast has launched by now. It's good stuff, I promise you. Go to our SoundCloud, Mike and Matt. SoundCloud.com/Mike and Matt. Go to our YouTube. Go everywhere. Comment, like people used to comment on a lot of stuff, and like we sometimes commented back. Maybe because we stopped doing it, they stopped doing it to us. But interact. We are reachable. We are on Twitter. The Real World thing is bad, but just search The Real World on Twitter. You'll probably find it. I am Matt C. Waters. You are Nquoid.
Nquoid is the pronunciation. Nquoid.
How the hell do I have the best Twitter handle out of our website, you and me? Well, not best, but easiest.
Because mine was made up when I was 16 years old and wanted something original. And it's just stuck on the internet. What's happening with you and Mike in terms of podcasts?
Well, Ben, that's hard to predict because of the timeline of this, but we have recorded, as of this recording, we have recorded 3 episodes about the 3 Blade films. They will be shorter than our typical podcasts because there's not a huge amount to talk about with Blade, but we thought it'd be fun. We will be doing True Detective at some point in time. There's also a super secret podcast that I keep meaning to actually get down to, but we're going to basically be recording it in stages before any of it even gets announced, but maybe that will have started to form. But for now, Ben and Matt's Marvellous Journey. Next time we're talking the Avengers. This has been the first Avenger, and we're going to meet all the others soon. I'm so excited.
I know. Do we have to refer to it as Avengers Assemble as we're the British people?
Yes.
Ugh.